Once again, we have that wonderful little small miracle that happens at Mass. Most of us are not very good singers, but boy, when we all sing together, it sounds great. Did you hear the response to the things at the beginning and the gospel? So it's going to sound good when everybody participates. That's a hint. Okay. We're in a section of Matthew that there are several different parables that he gives. And remember, the parables always have a deeper meaning. It's not just about what it seems like on the surface. It's a little deeper and has little tricks in it and little switches in it that we need to pay attention to understand them. And part of it, this is very normal in this particular parable. It's just that he goes out and he sows the wheat. He would walk and throw it out like that, and it would work, and that's what they would do. And all the people around him, the people listening to this parable, said, well, that's kind of a normal thing. But then there's the mystery. Where did these weeds come from? Of course, the master, well, it was an enemy. It was somebody snuck in there at night. And that's not easy, and at that time, there were no street lights and flashlights. It was dark at night because we didn't have all that light. Maybe if the moon was out, but if the moon wasn't out, it was very dark. You couldn't see much at all. And so this enemy comes in. So just be thinking about it. It's a little kind of twitch in there. So how did that get in there? Now, the good seed, think of the church. Think of the real glory of the church, of the saints throughout the centuries, the beautiful art that's happened, the faithfulness of people opening schools and hospitals and all sorts of things like that. Some really great stuff has come to the vineyard of the kingdom. This is part of heaven here. On earth, it's part of heaven. And so there were wonderful things happening there. But when we're asleep, then something happens. An infiltration of evil comes when we sleep, when we're not paying attention. In the Bible, the idea of sleep is usually a negative. Usually negative. Think of the 3 apostles with Jesus in the garden, with Jesus praying, and they went to sleep. So there's a sense in there of sleep that it's not a good thing. We're not talking about resting sleep, obviously, but it's not a good thing. And it leads us to another element of this parable. Somehow, in the mystery of the kingdom, God lets it work. He lets the world work. And the kingdom here on earth, it's a mixed bag. Not everything is good. There's many good things, but there are things that are not very good. And that's from the very, very beginning. The one lesson we have to take from this is that you should expect evil in your life. Just be ready for it, because it happens. And we know that. We've experienced it. And we will just expect that it's going to happen in the future. Now, God lets them, good and evil, work together and work at the same time. That doesn't mean that God is negligent. It doesn't mean he is unaware of the evil. It doesn't mean that he's not going to fix things eventually. So we learn another lesson of patience. I have a little paper stop weight on my desk, and it says, "Love them all, I'll sort them out later, signed, God." To have that kind of an attitude. And said, don't try to pick out the weeds. See, the weeds by this time have ensnared themselves around the wheat. And in those days, you didn't have all fancy machines, so you had to be careful of what you actually pulled out of the ground. But evil is there. So we have to kind of think about that. Now, the church in this world of ours, we have to kind of say, okay, what am I going to do about the weeds in my life? What am I going to do with this evil that's in my life? It's there. St. Thomas, when he was writing about the idea of evil, said that evil is a privation of the good. It's a corruption of the good. I'll give you a simple example. Think about your teeth, and you realize that you're getting a cavity. Well, that's a corruption of something that is good. The tooth is good. The cavity is a natural evil. It shouldn't be there, but it is. So you can't just pull out the tooth. So you go to the dentist, and you sit down there, and they take that little X-ray, and then they go out to kind of develop it and get it there like that. And then the dentist actually comes back to you, okay? And when the dentist comes back to you, she says, okay, we're going to get that thing out of there. Let's get that baby off, okay? Well, if that happens, get out of the chair and run, okay? But that's not what God does. God doesn't rip things out. That's not how he works. He doesn't use a hammer. Very rarely does he actually use something big. But this time, most of the time, it's very subtle and very calm. And so we have to have another lesson of patience. That things just don't go away because we wish them. And sometimes when there's such, even in evil, God lets evil happen, even moral evil. Look at Maria Goretti. What a beautiful young little 11-year-old. And her example of purity and courage when she was raped and killed. A beautiful example that there is holiness even in the midst of evil. Maximilian Kolbe. This beautiful witness of generosity. But you know, there would have been, if there were no Hitler, there would be no Maximilian Kolbe. God allows evil for a greater good. There are other kinds of natural evils, things like leprosy. And look at the beautiful ministry of Father Damien and Sister Mary Ann Cope, going into a place where they know they could die to take care of the sick and the weak. Or maybe even closer to home, sometimes families with a child with special needs, and that extra love that has to go into raising them and helping them. So there's a lot of wonderful things happening in our life. So the wheat is growing among the weeds. And what we have to do our whole life long is keep working with the Lord. Keep working that we become the wheat. That little by little, we remove the weeds from our lives. Sometimes a family can have a corruption, and they need to go to some counseling and find a better way to live with one another. It might not be your fault, but keeping the good of family fully in mind and heart, you work together to make it holy and good. So it goes on and on like this. There's a lot to unpack in this particular parable. It just is a wonderful thing. And there will come a time when you and I will meet our own harvest. Every one of us. That we will come to that point when our life here in the kingdom here on earth will end. And what we need to do is work very hard that we kindle the love we should have for God and others, so that at our harvest time, and we stand before the throne of God, there will be many more stalks of wheat than there are weeds.